One thing I really enjoy is to showcase young talent and encourage young talent. And that's been my thing ever since I was young. And I mean, not young, I guess when I was working with youth workers, youth work, I should say, and working alongside youth workers to encourage kids from like about 11-year-old onwards to like about 35. At the time I was about 35, so I was under that thing. But thank you for joining us. And here we talk about amazing creatives from our neck of the woods down under, New Zealand, the ocean, Pacific Ocean, Australia. And because a lot of other places highlight everything that's going on everywhere else around the world, mostly like 80% of it's American, but you never really get to hear about the great things that our own creatives in this neck of the wood are doing. So I'm quite excited to have, within like 24 hours of yesterday figuring out what was going on, Henry here with us. And, I'm quite excited that Rico's joining as well. And some of you might know Rico from last year. He was on here, and he's going to be talking about his game that's coming up. But first, I want to talk about get Henry to introduce himself, and because I don't know how to pronounce his surname, so I'm not going to even try. Yeah, so I want to put you on solo, and let's get some info from you, bud.
Yeah, hi. My name's Henry Goeldner. That E is silent, or it is now. I don't know how it was pronounced in old Germany. I am a professional writer, working in comics and video games, and a little bit of prose on the side. And I am the co-creator of the Star Tide Shores, which is a Kickstarter comic that we currently have up. It's in its last 3 days. You can find it. Just Google the Star Tide Shores, and it'll pop right up. Co-created with my friend Illuminated from Italy, so not a oceanic creator there, but that's the joy of the internet. And it's a space opera comic. It's gritty. It's funny. It's a one and done ride, and we're really proud of it. I think people really enjoy it. So that's me, and that's my project.
Awesome. Rico, same deal, dude.
Hello. I'm Rico Searle, comic collector and creator of New Zealand Comics and Collectibles on Facebook. I dabble in a bit of writing and art with friends, make the local community zine. But recently I've been working on game jams. And at the moment I'm entering the Game Developers Knockout competition. Made it to round 2. So I might talk a little bit about that if the space needed filling, or just add my 2 cents.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And that's our show. Good night. Just joking. Hey, thank you for hanging out with us. This is cool. I didn't realize both of you guys were into game. I mean, I knew Rico was into game development and stuff, but I didn't know, Henry, you were into it as well. So
yeah, it's just the last few years. No worries. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Cool. All right. So let's talk about, before we get anywhere else, let's talk about the actual project you guys got going on. And this is the Kickstarter for it. And right now, let me see what we were supposed to get. So you were after, oh gosh, you basically reached you've got your mark, right?
We hit the mark a little while ago and didn't really move much since, which started stressing me out a bit. Like Kickstarters, right. You're only done when you're done. And some people can be a bit quick to pledge and then find out as it gets towards the end of the month they don't have the money in the account, they cancel. So we want that to be as high as we can, just in case.
Yeah.
And no shame on anyone who does have to drop out, because I get it, cost of living, all that kind of stuff. My book shouldn't take priority over the groceries. Maybe it should. I don't know. But yeah, we hit our stretch goal for now. But the higher it is, the better. Roughly 5,000 Australian, 3,000 US, because comics are kind of international, and the majority of people on Kickstarter are American. And because I've been working internationally as a creator, I think in US, unfortunately, I think a lot of us do. So we're looking for the $3,000. Mostly as a form of distribution. The comic we finished earlier in the year, actually late last year, and this is just a way to get it out to people, get a customer base, get people's eyes on it in a way that doesn't break us trying to talk to a million stores all over the world who probably wouldn't be interested in a creator or anything anyway.
I think there is like there's something like that. Something about
in New Zealand there is
400 a month of new projects that go up, or even around about 4,000, something like that. New projects on Kickstarter every month from last time I looked, and it's quite a large amount. So you're competing with that with most of the time, which is kind of sad. People who actually have a huge name in the industry from the mainstream popping over, and next thing you know, they got 100 grand overnight, and you're like, wait, I thought you guys hated this shit, and next thing you want to be on here. And it's like where this is where people can basically come in, start a project, get some backing, and maybe get into stores and get some eyes on their, who they are. And I think, yes and no. I mean, I know Rico, he buys some stuff from like big names, on Kickstarter, and, but it'll be cool. Like my thing this year has been like support, newcomers to the scene, indie creators like yourself and like others like myself as well. So tell us a bit about the project itself.
Yeah, the Starlight Shores is a space opera comic, space adventure, whatever you want to call it. Essentially, it's in space, but the science doesn't really matter. That's what that really means. When I first showed it to a friend, they asked, "Oh, does she have a tall Sasquatch sidekick?" Very funny. It's you can't really escape the Star Wars comparison. It's a lot more Flash Gordon than it is Star Wars. It's very traditionally pulp. It's about a character called Elise Faulkner. She's a professional criminal, essentially, with a heart of gold. No, with a little bit of gold, but mostly just a bullet in her heart. She's trying to make her way in a very messed up galaxy. The influences are very early modern, 16th, 17th century for kind of both the aesthetic, but also kind of political situations going on. And she finds herself caught in a very tense political situation. And she kind of has to make decisions to navigate her way through that if she both wants to come out alive and potentially come out ahead, which is not always easy. That said, it is only a 60-page book, so we're not talking some big epic thing. And it is a self-contained story. One thing my collaborator Illuminated, great artist on Twitter, if you want to look him up. One thing we talked about is we get a little frustrated with Kickstarter how you back a book and it's part 1 of 6 or something. And it imitates the print market a little and kind of keeps you on the hook. If you want everything, you're going to have to like keep giving money. And I'm not knocking anyone who follows that model, but it's just something he and I discussed. It's something we didn't want to do. We want to put a full story in your hand right away. And if we do more, which we may or may not, depending on how things pan out, each book will be its own story that you can enjoy in a vacuum. You don't have to back this one to enjoy the next one. Right. It's very much steeped in that kind of pulp tradition, like a James Bond film or an Indiana, excepting the modern Bonds. Like you can watch any in any order and you'll be fine. Like Indiana Jones, like anything. Yeah.
So you're just basically doing a whole bunch of like, you're doing a one shot, and if it works, you're going to do another one shot, and if it works, you're going to do another one shot.
Yeah.
Right. So you are kind of you kind of like trying not to, but are following that whole thing of like we do one, and if it works, then we'll do another one.
But they won't be the same plot running through. You will get a unique story each time. With like you'll get the character each time, and you'll be able to understand everything without having to have read.
Is this the first showing of the character?
Technically, as a promo, we did a 12-page story that has been run on Twitter, which is a kind of an intro, more for the social media.
Kind of first appearance.
Yeah, just posted a page a day. I think that's why we hit our target so early, because we had a plan for the first 20 days of bringing out a new page every day for people to both, you know, promote the comic, but also something to like show.
Are they
what
actual pages of this story?
Yeah.
Oh,
they're not this story. It's a unique story on Twitter. 12 pages, all again self-contained, not directly connected to this one, but it shows you the character, it shows you the world she lives in, the major powers she is dealing with and has to operate around. And yeah, it's like an introduction.
Do you think you'd bring those to print ever? Or like, because you could do them as part of your Kickstarter stretch or something. Like a little,
we didn't want to mess around with stretch goals too much because of the print costs. Having to produce, we already have a number of variant covers, which are all done by great guys like Goran Gligovic, Adiyam, Trakanov, Nikola. I'm not going to try and say Nikola's last name. Good friend of mine, can never pronounce his last name. And and that's already, when you're printing those out, you pretty much have to do 5 print runs. You know, you've got the normal cover, then you got the 4 variants. To then add on top, well, if you pay extra, we chuck this thing that you can read for free on Twitter in the back. Puts the page count out to 72 pages, which creates questions about binding, which creates questions about a whole bunch of things.
Purist, so you could kind of go the Ashcan route and do it like real cheap, little nifty. But it's like Rick and Morty. They had the good Morty. It's like a little thing that came with the first DVD box, and that was his first appearance. So it depends. Like if you're into that whole collector cycle and the individual, I get that it's a compilation. Yeah, like it's a nice. Yeah, you could do that cheaper version, but comic purists probably would appreciate, the novelty of, the standard kind of non-color print or something. Maybe. But just
I've thought about it to take around to cons more than to do a full print run of, just to have something on the table. But I'm not a big con.
That'd be cool.
But I do get out to the smaller ones. But for the most part, we're trying to be realistic. We're trying to do something we can do. There's so many Kickstarters, and I guess this is advice for anyone who's running a Kickstarter. You gotta be careful about bloat. Like one of the problems with stretch goals, and one of the things that kills some things post-production, is they promise 100 knickknacks, charms, stickers, what have you, and then it delays the delivery of the actual thing people want. And I've seen it happen to friends. I've seen it happen to other people. So it's a conversation we had early. We're like, we're not going to do stretch goals. We're not going to do rewards. We're just going to do these 4 variant covers from these talented artists we know. And we're just going to do the story, and we'll see how it goes. Because, again, we're very realistic about our resources and the potential for the supply chain to get very frustrating very quickly if you're producing other things.
The thing is, like, the other thing is like the freight cost as well. So one comic, which 24 pages, 60, 30 pages, something like that, is going to cost around about 35 New Zealand dollars to post around, right? Which is kind of close to US dollars as well. Now you put another comic in it that's about 40 pages. That's okay. After that, around 60 pages, 70 pages, and especially if it's a square bound, it's going to cost a bit more than 35 New Zealand dollars, which is around about $20 US to get around the world. Now, have you had a look at postage and all that, and how are you including that on the back end?
Yeah, how we're handling it, because posting from Australia and New Zealand, I assume, is not fun. Because my co-creator is in Italy, he's an Italian man. He is going to essentially do a European print run and distribute from there.
Right.
I am going to handle everywhere else. The good thing is, I don't know if it's a good thing, the privilege we have is we are not trying to get paid through this. He's already been paid. I paid him last year with some money I had. The money we're getting through the Kickstarter is pretty much purely for distribution, to send it out, to get it in people's hands. So there's no postage charge on the Kickstarter. It's kind of included in the price. That's why the price is a little high, but that's because we're including postage anywhere in the world. on top of it. So you could be in the middle of Mongolia, we will send it to you. No extra charge. So we've looked into that. We've done rough calculations. That's where we got to the 3,000 figure. If it turns out we have some left over, we've got an agreement of how we're going to divide any leftover money. We've thought it through logistically, which is everyone's favorite part of talking about comics, is some logistics. But for anyone listening who is thinking about running a Kickstarter, this is important stuff you really have to think about. It's great to have a great comic, but the truth about being an independent creator is you have to have a plan to get it in people's hands. If you don't have that plan, you're going to run into a lot of unexpected problems post-campaign. You might find out you don't have enough money. You might find out your deadline for delivery needs to be extended because your printer goes out of business. The person who you thought could provide stickers, they come and they're not quality when they arrive. A lot of things can go wrong post-campaign that you need to prepare for. And it's something people don't talk about much, but they should if they're thinking about taking that step. Because
a lot of people just think, we're going to do this kind of thing, and they don't think about the other things that you're just talking about right now. What we've been talking about as well on this is that all the different costs that are involved, like the comic that we just got coming out in Kickstarter, next month or so. It's only going to be produced in America, only printed in America, digital everywhere else. But then we get to, because it's a one shot, but also there's a, following on. So it's like 2 stories in one book. So they're complete stories. So it's there. But then you look at to get one of those over to New Zealand, that's $35, right? New Zealand, just one of those books. So the way I planned it was by the time we get all 4 out, we re-release number 1s, right? All the 1, 2, 3, 4, and the trade. And now you can buy a whole bunch and get it all over the world, and that'll actually save everybody else who around the world a lot of costs on trying to get the comic, but at least at the end of it they'll be able to get a comic from the whole set plus a trade if they wanted and all that stuff. And you're right, a lot of people don't talk about it because they don't want to talk about it because it's a negative. But they have, you have to talk about these things when it comes to business because you got to see it as a business and there's costs involved. I'm quite interested in the way that you decided, to actually include the freight cost in it, because a lot of times, you don't know what country's going to do what, and somebody will go, well, if it's going to New Zealand, is it going to be cheaper or is it going to be the same price to America? How did you guys work that out?
Essentially, kind of averaged it out. With the understanding the majority of our orders would probably come from North America, and that's been true. I think something like 70 to 80% of the people, for those who don't know, when you do a Kickstarter, you get told where they are, where you're shipping to. Mostly the United States, some in Canada, mostly the United States. Of course, that's not universal. We've got plenty of Europeans and Australians and people, but it is predominantly the United States. So that tells us already the main number to work off. But also it's a benefit on our part of not needing to personally profit off this. So we're very privileged in that position. So we don't have to stress that. Other people do. So that's why some people fully fund. I would recommend not fully funding a comic through Kickstarter. It's worth pointing out 60% of Kickstarters, irrespective of what you're kickstarting, fail. And that's usually because people are asking for too much. People are trying to fully fund a comic in terms of paying the artist through the Kickstarter. Maybe it can work. I don't think it does most of the time if it's a fair page rate, because you're not going to get 10 grand out of.
I think it's that crazy scale, like I was saying before, when you get the Brian Politos and some of those other guys on there, the scale of it, they can do the whole series in one go. But then the little guy, it's very hard.
Sure. If you're Javier Polito and you want to do it, go ahead. You'll make all the money in the world. If you're not, be realistic about the amount you think you can get. I talked to a friend of mine, Seth Jacob, who is a Kickstarter creator and did a comic called Holy West. shout out to him because he's a big help. When I told him I was launching my first Kickstarter and we were looking for $3,000 US, he said that was a very ambitious target for a first-time Kickstarter. I was confident we could get it though, so I went ahead with it. But he was right. I mean, we're only a little over 100%. And we've got friends in good places that helped us out a lot. If you go on the Kickstarter, you'll see a full quote from Jeff Parker, who was big help early on. Jeff Parker's the American comic creator. He's not, I don't know him too well. Like co-creator Illuminated knows him a little better. A few other people like that. And obviously our variant cover artists who are all very, very talented, but also somewhat popular people on social media helped us out a lot, which is probably something to say if you're worried about hitting a goal, these are some of the strategic decisions you make. It's like, who can I afford to get to do a variant cover and what kind of audience they bring? It's very mercenary. I mean, I like all the guys who worked on it, don't get me wrong. I'm mates with some of them, mutuals with others. But there was a mercenary decision with some of them where I'm like, well, I know this will get eyeballs on the Kickstarter. And that's just a practical consideration. On top of loving their work and thinking that they're, amazingly talented people who I've always wanted to do something with. And they've been great all the way through. They've been promoting and sharing and all that kind of stuff too. They seem to really want this to succeed, which is good. So that's, there's a lot of factors to think about when it comes to how you're going to manage it.
You got to treat it like a business. If you treat it like anything else other than a business, then you're going to fail. Because it is a business. It's just because it's people giving you money and waiting for the product. It's still merchandising. It's still, commerce. It's still customer service. It's still, making people aware of what you're doing. You're not just showing up. I got a great thing and going away and not doing anything about it elsewhere, like not promoting it, not getting on Twitter, not getting on Instagram, not getting on Facebook, letting people know, directed them to new, like you did, like with the Twitter, right? You put up all these free pages leading up to it. That's just promotion. And, you got built an audience for that. And I think, that's basically what you got to do. This now is like, it's anybody's ball game. And if you want to get noticed, you got to really work hard at it. And you can't just, be out there and suddenly everybody knows you when there's like, when you got friggin', a comic by Keanu Reeves, right? For no reason. He just
I hate that. Sorry, Keanu, but you're not a comic book writer. You can go to hell.
Yeah, and it's just like, there you are. And it's like, boom, $100,000 done. And now it's going to be a movie. And it's like, let's promote it
was always going to be a movie.
Yeah. Right. So that's my question here, right? So when you said it was one and done, right? And maybe if it works, you'll do another one. A lot of people who come to Kickstarter from the mainstream comic book industries, and we've seen this. A lot of people have talked about. I had a conversation with Tom Hutchinson, Big Dog Inc. He's in the stores this week, right? He was talking about how a lot of people come and see this as crowdfunding, and especially comic books, as a way to pitch their idea for a movie, for a animation, for a TV show. And so they'll just put this book out and that'll be it. And, they'll get a whole lot of eyes on it. Then they'll go to the studios and go this. And we've seen this. I mean, I even saw that with like a book from, what's his name? One of my favorite writers, Garth Ennis. Panel for Panel was a movie shot, right? And it came and went, boom, like that. Nobody cares. Nobody talked about it ever again. It was really like it was a week at the shop and gone, because everybody saw what it was. It's like, this is a pitch for a movie. So a lot of people are doing that with comics. And so, when you go like what's one and done, a lot of people go, oh, okay, well, why should I? Because he's not in this for comics. He's probably in it maybe he's going to do it for the game design. Maybe he's doing that. And this, these are legitimate questions. Like I get asked that shit myself.
Yeah.
Like, are you here for
me? Absolutely not. It is a comic. The reason it's one and done is I've got a lot of stories I want to tell. Cool. This isn't the only comic story I have. I've got other ideas with the character in this world to tell in a comic form.
Yeah.
But it's primarily about my own preferences as a reader. I don't necessarily want something where I need to read 1,000 issues to get what's going on. I think it's one of the major problems with Western comics.
100%. Yeah.
And I come from, and Livio does too. Illuminated, his real name's Livio, which is he's credited as in the book. We both come from a background of really enjoying like old pulp literature, like Conan the Barbarian, like Flash Gordon, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you're talking to the right people here. I'm a Conan hardcore fan. Like, I've got the novel that Buck Rogers is based on, right over there. You know, like paperback Armageddon something. I just found it yesterday because I was looking around. But tell us more, man.
Yeah, so that kind of stuff where it doesn't matter how much of you have or haven't read, when you pick up, you know, those collections of short stories or one of those books or whatever, you will get a story that will tell you who the character is. It'll be a fun adventure. Hopefully it'll leave you wanting to see more. And that's the primary appeal of it is, you know, you can jump in whenever and have a fun time. And, you know, you'll get all kinds of different stories, all with same character. Like, again, Conan's kind of not the template for our book, but definitely a template for kind of sort of pulp hero where, you know, one day the story is about him robbing a sorcerer. The next story is about him leading a band of pirates.
That was my favorite thing about Conan, the episodic nature where you could put it down and then you're on a whole different adventure. So good.
And yet there are still subtle connective tissue through the Conan short stories. You know where he's going to end up. He's going to become king of Aquilon. You know, what was it, Arrow Dragon, whatever the novel's called.
Yeah.
Mine's blank on it. You know there's more than just the one adventure going on. He's got, you know, all this other stuff. And I enjoy that. It's talking in a comics sphere. Well, I mean, there's plenty of Conan comics too, but like, you know, like the Phantom, like, you know, Flash Gordon, like all those things that everyone knows.
Yeah.
They do a similar thing, and I feel that's been lost with Western comics, with this obsession with shared universe and crossover and event. If we're talking like Marvel, DC, where you no longer have this ability.
The dreaded crossover every 4 months.
And I remember.
The 90 books you must buy over the next 4 months when you can't even afford 5 books.
Yeah. If you want to understand what's going on in X-Men, you really need to read Iron Man, which makes no sense. But it's what put me off. I stopped reading American. I'll call them American comics, not Western comics. And even then, I'll call them Cape comics because I'm going to be fair. There's plenty of great American comics, Image and
mainstream,
IDW, and other people like that.
Yeah.
I got put off because you get these great, enjoyable runs, and then halfway through, and now read Dark Siege, which has nothing to do with anything happening in this book, but you got to read it now because it's going to completely smash into your book like a comet, and it kills the book. And it's just
not only does it kill the book, it kills the store. Like, I used to own a store, the comic store, right? So I watched Convergence happen in 2015. And I watched piles of crap on my shelves that didn't move for about 12 months.
Yeah.
Right? Because that was going to be the big thing. And right next to Convergence came the all new, all different, you know, where there was like Civil War 3 or something like that. And there was like, you know, like just 50 books of that. So it's like, you know, it doesn't only kill the reader, his enjoyment in the story, it also destroys people who are buying, because then they, you know, the retailers can't sell it, can't move it. It's like the dollar bin books now, because the only story that really matters is that 6 main title books, like House of M. It's the House of M story that's actually worth it. However, if you didn't like that other thing, you could go. But, you know, it's kind of weird. Like they just, you know, they were warned 10 years ago to stop doing it, but they haven't.
No, it seems like it's gotten worse and worse, actually, from the weather I have kept on Marvel, at least, because I was a big Marvel head back in the day. And the thing is, like, if you do like those, my favorite titles were always like the C and B list titles, because I felt like you could get a real story out of them. Whereas if you're telling a Spider-Man story, past the point, toys have to go back in the box, which can be very unsatisfying. So you read something like Thunderbolts, where theoretically, you can actually get character development, you actually get changing relationships that will matter long term. You can get a real story out of it. But then again, the event will just crash into it and ruin everything you liked about it. And it's no fault of the creative teams. There's extremely talented people working in the superhero medium today. Artists, writers, all kinds of people. It's just this beast that it's just bad. It's just awful for everyone. And I'm not going to pretend I know how to fix it, and that's not what we're here to do. But it is one of those things that put me off reading those kinds of books for a very long time. I will still occasionally check out something like a Daniel Warren Johnson mini, like Dead Earth or something like that, because he's a brilliant artist and writer, and his stuff is usually like an Elseworld self-contained thing. But otherwise, my interest in that stuff is very minimal. It would have to be something really interesting to get me to look at it, because who's got the time and money? Sorry, that's my wife in the background. So with the Startide shows, what we really wanted to do is what we enjoy, and avoid the things we dislike, even in terms of promotion. Like, we didn't cut the trailer for the Kickstarter. Some people say that's a must. If you don't have a trailer, even for a comic book on a Kickstarter, it'll either fail or not get as much attention. Maybe that's true. Maybe we would have done a little better with a trailer. But speaking personally, I don't watch trailers for comic books. I don't see the point of them very much. Flipping through still images in a video doesn't do anything for me, nor does hearing the writer necessarily tell me what a great book they've written is. Like, now, I guess. I mean, every writer thinks they wrote the best fucking
Exactly. That's the thing. I always notice that. It's like, my book is the greatest book. And I'm like, I don't know until I read it. Right?
Every writer has an ego. Every single one. We all, on some level, believe we're worth listening to. And worth being paid to listen to in our stories. Yeah. So you can't trust the writer. You can't trust me right now saying it's a good book. The fuck do I know? You can trust Jeff Parker. He thought it was pretty good. But you can't trust me. I'm going to tell you whatever I can to get you to read.
I send out like about 10 about 10 review copies to my mates who are in that, who like a writer, who does comics, who does Kickstarter, and all these different people, because I'll just go, tell me what you think, and I don't give a shit if it's negative, because I need to fix my book before I go to print. And I think a lot of people don't realize that like, once it's in print, it's done. It's there, man. There's no calling it back. So
the critique's really important.
I like that
on every
element.
level.
I like the idea that once it's done, even if you fucked up somewhere, that's what it is. It's out there.
Yeah.
I like the flaws in a book, the weird little inconsistencies that you'll.
But you want to fix the flaws.
There's a letter wrong or something. It's actually quite heartwarming, because she's like, that's a person putting out their work and they're passionate, and you've read it so intimately that you're like, oh, that's unusual, but it does humanize it a lot too. So
and specifically how we made the Startide shows, I do want to talk about that a little bit. Is a real collaboration with Livio, the artist. I wrote the script, but he went through it. And we talked the plot over before we even started, obviously, as well. Like what we wanted the world to be, what we wanted the themes to be. There are themes, obviously, but it's not a theme-fronted story. I'd like people to discover this for themselves. A little bit of anti-colonial kind of stuff going on, but we're not beating you in the face with it. No shade on anyone who does. It's just my preference is to have it be story-fronted and themes as an undercurrent. But Olivia and I talked it through, what we want it to be, what we wanted to do with it. And when I wrote the script and sent it to him, he went through it and he said, this is great, this isn't, can I change this? It's too much. We talked it through the same way he would do like the thumbnails of the pages. And I go through those and say, this doesn't work, this does work, this is great. Could you try this? It's a real back and forth for both our respective skill sets and mediums that we brought to the story. So we're very much co-creators of this. It's not my book. I think that really did impact how it is very much, and it's how it works so well as just 60 pages. Some people think that's not a lot of room to tell a story. I think that's because writers in comics overwrite a lot of the time, and they don't let their artist collaborators tweak the story the way it needs to be tweaked to tell in a visual way.
Yeah, there's one creator who made a lot of money recently who's getting shredded for his work, like really shredded for his work. And it's just, because it's you can come out and like start shredding people's work and who are professionals, and then when you do your own work and you get shredded and you can't handle criticism, it's another thing. And I think that's what I said, like about like, for me is I work with like at least about 5-6 different artists all the time, and I understand exactly what you mean when you say, hey, it's a collaborative thing and you're working with it, and you get to look at the panels and you go, oh, that doesn't work, or that works, and they get and then one of the things I've done is like, as a writer, like you're right, we put too much words in it, and when I look at the art and I go, the art needs, I think I'll change my writing, and I've said this often on here, is that I will go in and I'll tweak my writing according to what the art works. I'll move it around the bubbles. I'll move the bubbles onto the next page if I still need my story to be told, if it looks too much on the page. And I've had to do that, take a hard look at how I do that as well, because a lot of times you just think you're the writer, right? And you're like, it should be your story and you could do it. But really, comics is an art medium, and you got to let the art be out there and like really be the thing that grabs people's attention. And I think a lot of people just think it's art takes a back seat to writers, and that's the wrong way to look at art.
Do you
really cool.
Do you know who Boo Ronson is? Boo Ronson.
Sorry.
Do you know who Boo Ronson is? Either of you? He's a Japanese manga writer. He wrote Fist of the North Star and Lone Wolf.
Oh yeah, hell yeah! What?
Yeah,
just tell me the name of the.
He's not the artist. Okay,
yeah.
But he's not the artist. He wrote them. It's very rare to happen in manga for there to be a writer and artist. It's usually the artist does everything. Sort of. Oh well, no,
Yeah.
Beronson said, and I think this is something more Western writers can learn, is essentially what you said. It is an art-focused medium. The artist is the primary creator. The writer is the support for the artist. Even if it's their story or scenario or whatever you call it, the artist is the one who's actually telling it. Mm-hmm. And your job as the writer is to support them. More so than the other way, much more so than the other way around. And I mean, he's wrote 2 of the most famous and influential comics ever in Lone Wolf and Cub and Fist of the North Star. So I think he's someone to listen to when he says that. And essentially, like, and what I say, I tell people this all the time, a script can never be a comic. It's only a comic when it's drawn.
Yeah, man. The moment you see that art, when you see that art, that your script is, that becomes real. Like, I had an emotional moment last night because I saw a piece of work and I was like, holy shit, my page is now this. It's now real. It wasn't real to me when it was on paper, right? When it was just text.
I just saw the chat. I know maybe Q&A's later, but that's my friend Yari.
Yeah, I was going to do the Q&A later.
No, Yari, you got to read in English.
Yeah.
I know she's a friend.
That was about 40 minutes ago, so we'll do the Q&As later. Carry on.
I guess if you sold 1,000 copies, you'd be willing to do some translations.
If I could afford to.
If you sold loads, then you'd be like, yep.
Yari, if you're willing to translate, she's from Mexico. If you're willing to translate it in Spanish for me for free, okay. Okay, Yari, if you're there and you're listening, but you have to do it.
That's the question we're looking at here.
Yeah. Yari's a good friend of mine. She's great. But, I've got quite a few friends. I call them, okay, all right. I won't get into how I normally get into it. This is a friendly space. I've got quite a few friends from Mexico. There's probably after the United States. There's quite a few books going out that way. But great crew that I hang with online. Big supporters. Yari's one of them. Thank you, Yari. Love you. Yeah, I'll believe that when you do it. Yeah. You know what they say?
Word for exposure.
Yeah.
Well, I think that actually, to be honest, I think a lot of people don't realize that when a book is actually created, that book becomes your CV, right? To the next step in your life. And a lot of people who come into comics don't think about that as that. Like this thing here, once it's a real thing, right, is now a witness of and a testament of your great work, right? And I think people kind of like snub at that a lot because I think, all these people overseas, they're doing for less and like that. No, what they're thinking about is like, hey, once I've got this book, I can now go to some other publisher, with more money or whatever, and I can now show them this book here and maybe get a bigger job. And I think that's not what's happening in the West right now. And it's more like, okay, we're struggling, let's money up front. And that's another thing of that. And like, with the Kickstarter stuff, is like Kickstarter helps a lot of people get where they want to get as their first book and a first step in the right way, in the right direction creatively. But also lets you understand how people view the whole marketplace when it comes to comics, especially indie comics. Like, what was your experience with this going into this as a new creator?
Yeah, well, I'm not a full indie creator. Like I said, I do have a published credit through a American magazine. They distribute in the UK as well.
Sure.
Pulp Fiction was published a few years ago, just a short story. And it's actually relevant because there's not a lot of a market. Not really. There's not a lot of, particularly in Australia, Gestalt, the Fru, who I think they're still around. They do like the fandom stuff, and they're booked up for the most part. Like, yeah, they'll look at like hot talent that comes through and give people chances. So I'm not knocking them too much. But there's so many books a publisher can put out, and when you only really have, only really one publisher with major international distribution, like Gestalt, like, and they work with people who are working with, they either have connection to the ABC to get a TV show off the ground. They've got credits on American books like, say, Tom Taylor or something like that. It's understandable that's who they're going to go for. So it creates a very narrow industry, which is neither good nor bad. It's just a fact. Australia's
it's reality. That's the way. Yeah. Like only 1% of anybody's going to make it into the top tier of athleticism, right, at the top of the game. It's the same thing. Anything, business or comics, and there's only going to be one or two Todd McFarlanes forever, right? And Rico would, when Todd McFarlane decided to do that whole #1 Spawn thing, everybody was on it. Anybody who was anybody was like, I want that. Did you actually get that, Rico? Did you actually get a piece of that?
#1 Spawn?
Yeah, when they did that whole Kickstarter for the figure.
Oh, I didn't do that. I met him in Hawaii, like on my wedding anniversary. That was nice. And he signed a Spawn #1 for me.
You had your Spawn #1 in Hawaii, or did you go and buy one in Hawaii?
I literally I didn't even know a comic convention was on, and he was there and he was signing for free. And so I bought a Spider-Man #1 of the famous series of his, and then and then Spawn #1. Not the 9.8 or anything. Just I was like, well, there's some comics that. I had one at home, but I didn't have one there because I was on my wedding anniversary. Honeymoon.
When was that?
Hawaii.
Yeah, when was that?
I think it might be married 20 years now.
I was gonna say, Tanya, hey, you forgot your wedding anniversary when you got married. I'll hit her up and go, yo, he was on live stream and he didn't remember.
No, she won't be surprised.
You guys have a background in gaming, right? Like, so let's hit that. I'm gonna start with Rico with this one, and then we'll get into yourself there, Henry. And let me bring up this page.
Well,
There we go.
I
Retro
wouldn't
game.
quite say a background. I've got a passion
Yeah,
for, for learning to.
Yeah, dabbles at the
Um,
moment.
yeah, so probably the best way, if you click on my name there, Rico TV on itch.io, you'll be able to see like all the little projects that I've done. Like I started doing it seriously, so my name down to submitted. Yeah, they'll bring up my little, and so this is like my portfolio. And these are like, some of them are broken, but then one thing I found, like a comic, if you do the work, putting out there and showing it to people and going, hey, this is me right now, it's good to do that. Good to get a bit of thicker skin or take feedback.
Yeah.
And so I experiment with all different ideas. So these are all from little jams and things. That Cruel Thirst is the first one I did, and it's an entirely broken game. It's got visuals and it does stuff, but like it was, but then good thing you look back. So 2021, I kind of got back into it. Since I was a kid, I've always liked video games and dabbled, but I thought, I can get into this and have a play. Also, I made this for Ari's event for a mobile kind of app. So it's a slider puzzle.
Didn't realize that's so loud.
Where's the pieces? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's his cover, and it goes into the pieces, I think. But what is I suppose it's touch censored.
Yeah.
So it's just a slider puzzle. And interestingly, I learned that that's too many pieces to be easy.
Yeah.
I've learned that with other games. Like I made a maths game that my dad's a physics teacher, and he goes, like that's nearly impossible to keep track of. But yeah, my latest one is the Dungeon Pulse, which is a sound focus one. Round one, I entered Sakura Spring, which was a remake of early one I did. I left up my old version so people can compare and see. And maybe if I'm giving some feedback or showing. Sorry about the noise.
Sure.
No.
It's meant to be a pulse.
It's quite cool.
That's it.
So this
is like. Let me just pop out of there. So this is like tell us
that
about
one,
it's pixelated.
I went. Yeah, that one. So round one was art focused. So the Sakura Spring is a better example. So if you click on that, that's my most recent artsy one, and it's probably not as loud. But yeah, I put a lot of colorful bits in it, and experiment. I use parallax a bit, so I've been practicing. Not that I haven't been familiar with parallax, but I can't say I've been a master of it at all. And the reason I make people push a key is because, like, for itch.io to wake up when it's in a browser, it's got to have a key input. So this one's got don't click story because it's like a voiceover.
Okay. So,
yeah, that's So I'm just constantly experimenting. I've been told by some of my collaborators or people I jam with, my friends in that area, oh, you've got a big, you made lots. So that's good. Like I just kind of keep at it. Full Scale Invasion there is probably my most complete kind of mainstream game. That one was done, I can't remember for which jam, but it was like with like I think 800 people submitted, and I came 300 and something. I tend to come in the middle, so I've been scaling upwards. And like I say, in these competitions, there's always such a high level in the end, and often you can really respect all the higher places. But interestingly, right at the top, consistently, there's a simple concept that doesn't have to have beautiful art. It's just really well crafted material, and you just respect it so much. Like that, and you go, well, I can see exactly what you've done. And it's not that no one else could do it. It's just you've done it very well, and it's great to just learn. I made a little YouTube ad, so I've been fiddling around because marketing, like we've been talking about Kickstarter, even when you're jamming and doing stuff, it's all important. I want people to play my game. Maybe 100 people, maybe 200. The more the merrier. I want to get feedback from people. I want people to notice me, and so I accept I'm not at the top level, but if I do the best I can and I show my growth and I keep on putting it out there, then like the people that don't do it and go, why is it not happening for me? That's kind of the reason. And so I'm learning from all these experiences. And the most valuable thing I get is feedback on my things. When someone offers me feedback, like when people go, oh, looks great, like Steve, thank you. That's great. But like the most beautiful feedback is, hey, looks great, but this is broken, or but this would be better. That's just magic. And then when you implement that and you notice the difference it makes, and you go, next time I will do more of that.
Right.
Every time I submit jams are time based. Every time I enter early, and then you update it and you chuck it on there towards the last minute. And you'd be familiar with this, Henry. But every time I do a fiddle round, I go, oh, I found some errors, and I fix it, and I turn off a layer or something, and I recompile it and chuck it on. And then I get someone to like do a stream or something. I go, oh, play my game, and they play it, and it's got this blatant missing bit, and the game still works, but it's missing this whole layer. Like for my latest one, it was the death scene, and it would tell you, you've died. Do you want to continue? People are just like, it just stops. It goes to a halt, and naturally it looks broken, but actually it isn't. But like me fiddling around with that, and so it's so vital to just go back and visit these things. So I learn lots. I've got a composer in Denmark that I work with, Fidel Delgado, who was always on jams, and you'd be familiar as well if you've done a bit of this, Henry. And like people are like, oh, who wants sound? Who wants a composer? Who wants to? And I thought one day I'd just work with someone. And it's hard being in New Zealand and Australia, I imagine, because you're like the time difference. How the hell am I going to work with someone when we're in America and New Zealand? But here we have found it's exactly 12 hours different. And I've just gently been introduced to things like Discord, which I not used very much before, and it's been working. So I found my own little team, and so for my current ones, I've had to make the music or use music that I bought from royalty-free stuff. But these other ones, Full Scale Invasion, Piggy, he's made tracks for me. And when we start out such a tenuous little thing. We're just like, I'll try working with someone. I'll let him make something for me, and then we've become good friends. And so that's been pretty magical. Sorry,
I should quantify a little bit. My background in gaming is only writing for games. I don't create games myself. I'm not a coder. Right. I've got no experience in that. I've been hired by a few indie studios to write some scenario planning and dialogue and things like that. I have recently stepped into, at this startup, but it's way too early to talk about anything. I've stepped into a production producer role, but my background has only been scripts, which involves a little bit of scripting, but nowhere near what you're talking about.
If it makes you feel better, I use visual code. Which, to be fair, the most experienced people, when people stop caring about dick measuring, there you go, I swear that a little bit. Like they say, hey, look, if it works and it's functional and it's efficient and it does, you can build your systems in there. It's like it's not the people look down at you and the people in the position. It's just like in that lower level where you're like, oh, you got to type all your code and stuff. And you learn it through doing the visual stuff anyway. Like the same core rules are there. And the funniest thing is just like an uppercase and a lowercase letter is often what screws you up. It's like, why is this guy not dying? And it's just your Boolean name's like just slightly wrong, or you've put true twice. And it takes so long to, so you just got to make really clear code, even if it's visual or regular, and put comments and things. But it's a lot of fun. And I've been meaning to use SQL to like build a dialogue. I'm learning SQL, like I'm using, so I haven't used it, but that's my considered more advanced stuff, and that draws from databases and things, data tables. And so I'm planning on building something where I have a more complex dialogue tree using that, maybe, like, as I figure that can help you kind of keep your head over it a bit easier, maybe.
When you talk about dialogue, are you talking about like vocals, actual sounds, or are you just talking about like
no, but I love voice. So these days voice is becoming so much more available. Like, hey, we've got space, so if we want to talk ourselves, like, it adds value even if it's just you. But you've got so many filters. You got the dreaded AI, you've got all sorts, you've got the digital voice, you've got so much ability to do it. But underlying it all, it's like, hey, do you want to buy an apple? Yes, no. Oh, my apples are really good. Why not? Like, kind of thing. Oh, Sally wants an apple. Yeah, like, and so the more you can make it more complex. Like back in the day, and I haven't gone down that road because dialogue trees are tricky. Yeah. And they loop round, but yeah, like that'd be a cool learning for me to kind of build on that. And certainly if I was making an RPG, it'd be very important to have a good dialogue tree.
I was using like I joined a dev to work on his like as an editor for his script editor, story editor for his Rampy game, which is an adult game. And so it was a fantasy adult, like not fantasy, actually fantasy characters, monster characters, horror, adult game, total R18. And I remember like seeing the script for the first time. I thought like, you know what, this needs a lot of work. And I remember some of the spelling mistakes. It was coming out of somewhere out of Europe, and I was like looking at it going, okay. So I was like, okay, I'll edit that. Just pay me when it starts working out. And I remember doing about like 6 chapters, and then like going from like something like about I guess about 500 words or something, sentences of dialogue for the first one, to like getting up to about 4,500 for 4,500. Is it 4,000? Yeah, 4,500 words for a single chapter, which was chapter 6. The next thing I hear is like, and it's made him money. Like, right, he's getting up to 500, I think, and all I'm getting is like $11 or something a month. And I'm thinking, this is weird. Like, I thought we were gonna like up my thing. And next thing I know is like, you're no longer working on it. I'm like, I'm gonna get this girl to work on it. I'm like, I just got your game from being like the crappiest dialogue game ever to where, as an editor, because I've done 3 years of freaking just learning how to be, film, cool and all that shit, and now you're all up at $500 from $10 a month, right, on Patreon, and now you're going to get rid of me. And I'm like, yeah, this is pretty stink. But then I realized that something must have happened, because nothing's been out for 6 months. Right.
Yeah.
When we were putting out like almost every 2 months, because you had me going, let's edit this, let's go. You do the artwork and I'll go do and I was teaching him how to actually tell the story, because you know how you plot, and you go, this happens, this happens, this happens. I'm going, this is what happens. And it's interesting that a lot of people who actually do game don't understand how a story works. They have an idea, they have a concept. And I'm sure you've met that as well. This is my character, and this is what I'm going to do with it. It's a lot like in comic books as well. People go, I've got this character. He's like this and like this. And it's like, well, what's the backstory? Who's his family? What's his motivation? Does he have a special song that he likes? Is there a book? Is there something that's going to drive him to do what he does? I don't know. Well, that's what we need to know. Yeah.
Gaming's interesting. And you're right. There are parallels to the comics industry, although I think it's a parallel to any sort of do-it-yourself industry in general, where people come in with very pie-in-the-sky expectations of what it's going to be, and they don't want to accept that it is work. It is fundamentally a job that involves work. It's a very fun job. Writing in any medium is really fun. It beats working in the sun. I used to work in the sun in Australia, in Brisbane. The humidity, it's not fun. But it is still work, and you need to do your research. You need to know your limits. Bloat, I find, is the biggest problem in gaming, where people want to do everything and they don't have the resources. This is where game jams are very useful, where they teach you your limitations a little bit. But so many people go
overscoping.
Yeah. I want to make an RPG with 12 unique companions, and they all have their own romance quest lines, and they've all this. It's like, all right, you don't want to ever release this game. That's what I would immediately think if I was told that. Because it's a lot of resources. If you're working in a team, it's a lot of time resources, but also money and assets and things like that. And you need a good plan when you head in that direction. You need more than most. The closest thing it is in any other medium is film production. And anyone who's done film knows, like, the most important part is shooting the film, but the second most important part is pre-production. If you fuck up pre-production, odds are you're going to fuck up the shoot. You're going to fuck up shooting the film. And that's true for games too, where if you fuck up the pre-production, when you actually start making the game, it's going to fall apart very quickly.
It's interesting you bring that up, as it's like the comic medium, the game medium, and the indie film medium. You're taking on all the roles yourself, like half the time, and that's the real challenge. You get everything. You're the sound guy, you're the music person, you're the marketing team.
Well, I was really lucky in games in that I came into a pretty good indie company. I won't go on about who or what, 'cause it's not out yet. There's like all NDAs and things. Even though I'm not with them anymore because I've moved on to work on my own projects with this other studio. And I was paid a wage straight away, $20 US an hour. By the time I left, I think it'd gone up to 25 US an hour, which is close to $50 Australian. Really good pay. Capped pay, but the cap was 2,000 Australian a month. So about close to just over 4,000 Australian a month, which is pretty good for gaming in indie sense in a virtual studio at home. So I was really lucky in that I got that opportunity. And I got to learn too, because the good thing about being a writer on a game is you have your area of responsibility, but otherwise in a lot of respects, you're kind of an observer to everything else.
Yeah.
So you can learn from other people's mistakes. Like you see, and this is like moving into more of a production thing at this new place. You can see where they've run into roadblocks through unexpected problems of managing the music or managing other assets. So much of it's about relationships, like anything, good communication. This is more, again, from a studio perspective. I've never worked on the single creator element where you have recode, which I admire. I really think that's really cool. If I had the patience for coding, I'd absolutely be interested, but I know my limitations. As a person, I know I don't have the character to do that kind of stuff, or the patience. I'm a very impatient person, which, not always the best thing in a creator, but it means I get shit organized and done quickly because I'm impatient. But you get to watch a lot, and you have to do your rewrites, and you have to fight for what you want on the project, because so much of being a writer on a project is doing what you're told, which is a very interesting experience. I assume, I haven't worked in TV, but I assume it would be similar to being part of a TV script team, because it's not your show. You're writing for the showrunner or the head writer, you call them. So you have to find ways within the project to kind of do what you want to do, but it has to match what they want. And you'll run into walls doing that, because obviously they call the shots and they have their vision. Yeah. But to be satisfied as a creator, you do need to put something of yourself in everything you do. Yeah. And it was interesting learning ways to do that in something that top to bottom is not yours, never will be yours. And you're just one of the team. So that's the thing I found really interesting about working at that specific position in that studio. And why I'm really excited for what's coming for me in the future, which I'm not supposed to talk about, I'm not going to talk about. But
you can tell us once it's out there, you can come back and
talk about it. Sure. No, I'd love to.
We're not here to put anybody on the spot, and this is casual conversation.
We could give it a play when it comes out.
No, I love it. I love you guys too. But again, I've been really lucky in a lot of things.
Yerika wants your time, man.
I'll talk to you later, Yari. Yeah, she's cool. With
here's the thing about translation, really right? Hold on. Let's talk about translation for a second. So here's the thing about translation. What's the most number of people in the world that speak a certain language?
I think it's close between English and Chinese. I think it's pretty close. Maybe if you count as a religious language, Arabic's up there, but I need to check. Last I remember reading, it was English as a second language.
The other thing of the other side of that is, like, how many non-English speakers want to learn English?
Quite a few. Less so. Well, I don't know. We'll see in the next couple of years what happens with.
Yeah,
because what happens to China, but a lot of people want to learn.
Yeah, I mean, you got Cantonese and what was the other word? I always forget the other one.
Mandarin.
Sorry?
Mandarin.
Mandarin. That's it. I know it was the other one, but I was thinking something else. But yeah, Cantonese and Mandarin, right? So some parts of Asia and you got East Asia. They speak different, Cantonese or Mandarin. However, you've got Spain and you got Europe and so on. A lot of them, depending on who they are, country-wise, they like the translation into their languages. However, manga's only been so big because it went into English. And if manga stayed in Japanese, if manga did not cross over into English language, into dubbing into English, it'd still be stuck over there in Japan or just in Asia. And I think this is one thing. I know everybody wants like, hey, translate. But if you see the way the world's going, English is like even though people got, Cantonese or Mandarin, there's even Cantonese and Mandarin speakers do want to learn English because it's kind of like the universal language, where you can actually get online and go, hey, hello, how are you doing? And then you can use your translator, like Google Translate.
I could speak to this a little, even though I'm not making a comic in English or otherwise. But in game circles, like when you do actually get good, and not me for just observing people, the people that do very well, they get to the point where they have a fan base and they have a successful game. They always talk about how people reach out to them, and they learn that it's very respectful to kind of, like one person said, oh, these people in Italy or something really, it might not have been Italy, but really wanted it. They were calling out for it, and actually that's become a big part of my sales. I didn't even think about it. And like, it's a kind of a respect thing. Like I mean, I know like I read all English and like I don't see lots of translated stuff, but I think the people that do, when you are making it and people are asking for it, then it's probably a nice thing to do. And if you're able to in formats.
It's sometimes it's a question of resources. I think
that was the next thing.
Translation is great, and it depends on the country. Like different countries have different rates of English speakers. Like if you look at Northern Europe, the Scandinavian countries, Germany, places like that, a lot of people at least read English, if not speak, and usually speak it quite well. To the point where in Denmark, I believe, they don't translate anything; they just bring it over in English. It's killed the translation scene they had in the 80s and 90s because English is just the natural second language. Whereas somewhere like Argentina, quite a lot less English speakers. So if you find you do have a large fan base in Argentina, for instance, Spanish translation is probably the way to go. I'd agree, Yari. There are people who don't want to learn English.
Or wouldn't want to learn it in their entertainment stuff necessarily.
But that also, like, it's kind of like, it's because we don't want to, there is the other part of that. So we don't want to lose our own culture, right? We don't want to lose part of that. But the thing is that, like, I mean, we get a lot of, I watch a lot of Universal, global foreign films. It's just I just love that. From anywhere, even from Spain, Brazil, whatever it is. If it's it's got a subtitle on it, I'm there. If it's fantasy, if it's horror, if it's crime drama, thriller, I'm into that. I don't care what country it comes from. I'm watching it.
But you kind of just said it because you said if it had the captions on there.
Yeah.
But then with a comic book, that's the translation.
It is worth pointing out. Specific to Latin America, they have massive interest in manga and anime. They have their own industry for translation and things like that. Like the Spanish dub for Dragon Ball Z is legendary in Mexico and other parts of Latin America. And also in France, they translate a lot into French because the French are very proud of their own language.
Yeah, they don't like.
There's this fun thing. I was in Europe last year to meet some friends. Not something I regularly do. Don't worry, I'm not missing my bags. It was my first time in Europe, possibly the last. Not because I didn't like it, just got the money. And we were in Italy, and then we went to Ireland. But I won't bore you with a travel log. But something I picked up on is it's kind of a national character thing. Italians, for the most part, don't speak any English, but they're very nice, and they want you to think they do, so they can be helpful. The French, they all speak English and they all pretend they don't because they do not want to help you. They don't want to speak your language. They want to speak their own language, and they kind of resent knowing it a little bit, which again is not a knock necessarily on the French or on the Italians or anything like that. It's just something, it's just an interesting thing I noticed while I was over there. Depending on where you are,
Well, it's like
I think
Canadians, right?
yeah.
Like the part of Canada that only speaks French, right?
Quebec, yeah.
Yeah, and that's all they will. They don't even speak English. Or like it was the Quebecs will just speak
Even though
French.
they all speak English.
Yeah, but to you they won't. It's like, yeah, you know, we're French. Yeah.
I think if you're going to, if you find out you have an audience, like you were saying, Rico, it's a country that doesn't speak English. If you have the resources to release,
if you've made it, and you have the ability and the audience.
Yeah, I think the ability is the main thing, because you can always find an accommodating friend or fan if it's that big, who will help you out with a Spanish language or whatever language release. And they do it themselves. Russia has a big translation scene for translating things into Russia. One, because they don't actually get the official release very much for various geopolitical reasons we don't get into, but also just out of a fan demand. When the fan demand is there, an industry will develop. Like you're saying about manga, the demand was there. People wanted to read it. They thought, this looks really cool. I don't want to learn Japanese. Can someone translate this for me? Exactly. I think that's a fairly universal thing. Yeah. But then it becomes an industry, and then things change and all that. It is statistically true that English is one of the most commonly, if not the most commonly spoken language in the world, for a lot of reasons. It is sort of to be a little ironic lingua franca of the world.
I think it's just easy for commerce, and like that's basically it is right. Like just being able to like say, this is what I want, thank you, this is the money this costs. And if you just learn that much, and you know, when thinking,
it's also the language of the internet.
That's the other
really
thing.
Is, which is unfortunate in a way, because because let's be honest, the English of the internet is American English, which becomes very suffocating sometimes. I refuse to use the word Z unless Dragon Ball comes.
I freaking when it's writing, I'm like, stop spelling this incorrect. This is the Queen's English.
Yeah, Color has the King's English. Thank you very much.
Yeah, King's
Color.
English. Stop changing my freaking text and telling me it's incorrect.
Color has a U in it. It has a U.
Yeah.
But so that's where, you know, I'm very sympathetic to the people who resent the cultural domination of English. Yeah. Even though I'm, you know,
isn't it Latin though? Like English is like it's got space in Latin and all those different, you know, it's different cultures, and it's like now it's a mashup of that, and now it's become like, you know, like if you look at other countries, like they speak like pidgin English and stuff like that, you know, and just to get by, you know.
Yeah, it's a very, in some, I'm not a massive linguist, but it is a very utilitarian language. It cribs from other languages much more easily than some other languages do. Sorry. That's why there's so many loan words in English compared to other languages. Like you just grab any word from anywhere, chuck it in a sentence, and you make it work. There's so many variations of, like you're saying, there's pigeons, there's Torres Strait pigeon as an example is specific to North Queensland, and PNG places. There's Creole, which is a kind of a hybrid of French and English. It's one of those languages that just has that element to it. But also, colonialism is the real reason. I think any language can evolve to meet the demand of a people and what they need. But the British Empire was a thing, and it was a very powerful thing. And even when it stopped being a thing, it still retained a cultural and economic authority through banking and the BBC and the American expansion into the former British Empire and things like that. I mean, we could talk forever about this. There's literally millions of academic papers out there about it. And we just, for right or wrong, we live in a world that spent the last 200 years being dominated. Thanks.
I'm also glad for that, because some of us wouldn't even be alive these days. I look at myself from India, the lowest of the low caste in India, to Fiji, to be able to come over to New Zealand. Imagine like never having European, culture come and be part of that, and never actually having be able to travel, be able to be part of this environment that we live in. So that's why I'm always like so grateful for the environment we have right now, technology wise and everything. And
it's kind of it's sorry, voice broke there. I'm a 30-year-old man. It's kind of one of those who knows questions. Like, who knows what the world would be?
Well, I'm 50, so I've seen like the whole period of like what it was like in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, and how in the 90s and 2000s we had such a great appreciation of other cultures, and suddenly the last 10 years we just shed on all that. To be honest, I've just watched
It's good to be grateful, but it's one of those tricky subjects. Not that I mind talking about it, but I find like everyone's got their like. I'm sure we wouldn't get it.
Weirdly enough, this is relevant to the Star Touch shows. One of the
I did feel like.
Yeah.
It can get dreary, but I think I think we get.
Let's go back to space opera.
Yeah. Well,
let's go to the sci-fi take.
One of the main influences for the book was a history book on the British East India Company called Anarchy, by William Dalrymple. I think I pronounced his name correctly. Scottish writer, but very much based out of India, and about how the East India Company essentially came in and destroyed India, more or less, for profit, just for a buck, and that they had the largest land army in the world at one point, and they were a private corporation.
Yeah.
They theoretically answered to the British Parliament, but in reality, it was often the other way around. And they're a big influence on the geopolitical situation in the Star Touch shows. That book is very enlightening. I knew some, I didn't know the details, and kind of frightening. And you can kind of see the legacy in how corporations operate today. Much more subtly, and weirdly enough, than they used to.
There was, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there was like this, this sari, like this like particular way they made, the Indians, women wear these beautiful saris and stuff, and they actually broke hands of the weavers, right? So there are all this atrocious stuff that has happened as part of East India Company, because they're like trying to bring it into use the machines and make it in England. It was so they could make money off it, but it was cheaper if they had them. And it's like all this, So
they used to break the hands of people who refused to work exclusively for the East India Company. Murder them too on occasion for poverty wages. Then that's why they would say no, because no, that's not enough money to get by. And they say, we don't care, we have monopoly. Your king signed a letter saying we have a monopoly to work here. You have to work with us.
It's happening in China right now.
It's all over the place, to be honest. It never stopped. Sweatshops in Vietnam. We're lucky in Australia and New Zealand that we have such a robust workers movement compared to even America.
That's why I'm so glad that we're in the West out here. Man.
Well, even in the West, like the United States,
there
are states in the US who are trying to get rid of child labor laws. Yeah, which is insane.
We had it with those fruit pickers, and they had that big crackdown recently.
Over here we've just had laws passed in Parliament giving greater protections to gig workers, which is really great because those guys were dying on the roads. So many car accidents and scooter accidents because, we are lucky in a lot of ways, but we also have to recognize, I think, that like a lot of the exploitation going on, I think we've all heard it, but a lot of the exploitation going on in places like Vietnam and things like that, it's not for the benefit of the Vietnamese, it's for the benefit for us. So we can make cheap sneakers that we can then ship over to the United States or wherever and force us to pay
$90 for it.
When they pay the kid who made it. So it's like it's this nasty relationship that's really deep. I mean, I'm not one to say I don't believe in the moral ethics of the consumer power. I don't think you can really spend your way into moral decision making. I only buy eco-friendly. I only do this. I only do that. I don't think that's a responsibility of the individual. No, because it's impossible. It's impossible. It really is. But we do need to be aware of what underpins our society when it comes to exploitation, so we can at least try and leverage political pressure to try and answer those questions at an individual.
One of the interesting things that's happened recently, like in America, right, with just the border. And did you notice, like, this lady finally, this rich white lady, like solo mum, whatever, finally got her own personal chef. Because now because she could take home an illegal over the border. Now she's got a live-in chef. You know,
yeah.
Do you really understand what you've just done? You know,
America's really odd because they've got this form of prison labor that is essentially you can get a work release program to be a butt at a mansion of private residence of a person. And you are a convicted felon, usually for a pretty minor crime, because obviously they don't want a rapist or a murderer working in the mansion. But they essentially bus in prisoners to work for like nothing in states like Alabama and Georgia and places like that. It's wild.
Yeah, one time, like in the 90s, I got arrested for receiving goods, like a stereo. I had to do like 40 hours of hard labor for like cutting gorse, like 4 hours a day cutting gorse. And you know what gorse is like, right? And like all the pricks and stuff, like, you know, thistles, whatever they call them, you know, prickles. And I was like, I never want to do this ever again.
I was gonna say, like not that I don't feel sorry for you in some way, but like, I mean, I think it's a good thing if it kind of teaches you not to, and like you're doing something for the community. Let's say you did something worse.
Yeah, it was what was it called? Community service. So you know, rather than getting you know, going through went through the court system, yes, guilty, whatever, and boom, you're out 40 hours. And I was okay with that because that taught me that like that's not what I ever want again. You know,
my brother was pretty wild and ended up in similar situations. But the big difference in the United States is they take these people, they bust them from a prison to a mansion to work, and then bust them back to the prison.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with.
Well, now they get to live in by coming into the country illegally. You live in the house of the mansion, and then you know, it's just crazy. But Nugget was saying here, who's also an artist, by the way, an animator. Have you read the original Spanish version of The Black Sad?
To Yari, if you're around Yari, I haven't. I don't speak Spanish. I have read Black Sad, which is quite a good book. It's good. It's not perfect. I think it's a little overrated. Because
I only read about 1-2 pages. That was it for me. I think didn't really get into it.
Yeah, I like it. It's good. It's a good noir story, but it's one of those things where we're so hungry for comics in the Anglosphere. Good comics that don't star Captain America. That the stuff we do get, when it's beautifully illustrated, we see that and we go, okay, that's great. And we don't really. Comics criticism is kind of dead in the Anglosphere unless you really dig into the indie spaces, because I think I don't know. I'm getting a bit mean here. I think the comics community has a pretty low literary standard for the most part.
Yeah.
And that's not so. Yeah, that's a little. That's
no, it's true though.
Do you mean that it's at a lower level? Like, because I think a lot of us just want to escape a bit of.
No, it's about the standards. It's about because it's a much smaller industry. It's got much less people working. Like, compare the amount of comics published in a year to the number of prose books published in a year, and it's nothing. There's very few. Where's the Booker Prize? Sorry, the Booker Prize of comics. The Eisner? Not really. Where's the Nobel Prize for Literature for comics? It doesn't exist. A lot of the literary awards, unless you go to like France and Europe, they go to like issue 37 of Squirrel Girl or whatever. It's just like, is that the award-winning book of the year? That's not exactly brainy stuff. You know, that's not exactly stuff that's challenging the reader. And it doesn't need to be every book. Every comic book doesn't need to be some dense Alan Moore treatise on the evils of the world or what have you. But I do think that lower standard impacts everything in comics to a degree. Where, you know, you can skate by on good enough a lot of the times in comics. Good enough is good enough. And I'm not knocking anyone's taste, and I'm not knocking any specific creators, because I do think there's wonderfully talented people all through the comics sphere. I'm not sure if we're still alive, but if we are, there's wonderfully talented people all through it who are great writers and great storytellers and great artists and illustrators and all that. But I do think the standard, the benchmark is lower than it is in other more mature, meaning longer existing industries like prose novels, but even bigger or film, which is about as old as comics really, but I think is a more mature industry.
Yeah, I can see it. Like, it's weird. They all do move around though. Like, it's like, I feel like during a certain period in the 90s, I can't remember the exact point, but there was just such a big patch, and every single film was just like more or less garbage. Like the storyline, the quality, everything. Like, I can't remember exactly when, but and I know books obviously have changed over the years. But I guess, like you said, there's so many to go through that there's a much wider range. And
yeah, it's a thing of, you will find, if you have, say, 10,000 books versus 1,000 comics, the laws of averages say you're going to get more good books than comics. It's just how it works. Like, if it's 10% of 10,000 is always going to be higher than 10% of 1,000. If we're talking about that's how many good books there are. Which is why I think Kickstarter is a good thing. Crowdfunding is a good thing, because it's giving a chance. Because the reason for that is such a narrow industry where there's not a lot of opportunities. That crowdfunding opens the opportunities to more voices and more people to get their stories out there that didn't have a shot even 10 years ago. Because, I mean, if we're speaking from the Anglosphere, it's so dominated by like Marvel and DC, or even 2000 AD, where the goal isn't to tell your own story a lot of the time, it's to work on a character. And that's not the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's a little unfortunate. It's why manga has such a dominating presence now, and why it resonates so well with readership, is because it more closely emulates the prose novel experience than what we've come to expect from Anglo comics, where the idea is you're reading the continuous adventures of Captain America, or the continuing adventures of Judge Dredd, or whoever, because it's not a phenomenon specific to the United States. Britain's got its problem with that too. Whereas manga,
like the decline in comic shops might have something. As a comics always used to have the newsstand or your comic shops with all your issues, and these days, like graphic novels is just like when they hit a point and they kind of compile them. But like most comic collectors, they want that comic shop experience. So there's really like not much of it left in the world, and they're not in bookshops generally, very rare.
Well, this is the thing where it's like most manga readers aren't collectors. Again, it's more like the prose novel experience, where all they care about is a good story. They're not interested in like variant covers. They're not interested in these things. They want to know what happens to Naruto.
That is true. However, the guys who control them, who control the medium, who control the IPs and all that, they want merchants.
Of course.
They want all their money doesn't come from the collecting of the manga, right? Maybe the box sets. It all comes from the IP. And so in a way, it's the same thing as comics, but just a tweaking of it. So you got a long-lasting ReZero. This is what this is from, right? Ray from ReZero. You're not paying for like a maximum $30 variant comic. You're paying for a $60 figure instead.
If you're a collector.
Yeah, and most mangaka, most otakus, right? And weebs like myself who enjoy manga and anime and stuff will buy them. And so your one and done manga, right, doesn't really matter that much, because the people who actually control a very small group who actually control all that money that's in manga and the IP productions and merchandising and all that. That's where all their money is, right? That's all this is. For them, it's all about this. Anime, to get this little book over to anime and then get that over to this, and this is where all the money is.
It becomes a cycle of profit. Essentially, still profit. But from the readership point of view, from the point of view of the audience itself, see, this is where, because the comics reading audience is smaller, it's more of a, generally speaking, the guy who buys the comic is the guy who's going to buy the statue. That's not actually true for most people who read manga. That's where the money is, but it's a minority of readers that make the money. Most people are content with just the book. They'll buy all the anime, depending on which one they're into. So say take Full Metal Alchemist, for instance, which was a big hit when I was young. It's surprisingly short. It's not very long as a manga, and you can read it all in a weekend and you're done. It's great. If I wanted to read Batman and Robin, where the fuck do I start? I got to figure out, oh, well, do I like this writer? I don't know. I don't know who that writer is. Do I like this artist? I don't know. I've never seen their work before. Does that artist stay on this book? No, they switch out for another artist halfway through, and I don't like that other artist. And it becomes this web of confusion. Whereas if I want to read Akira, I just grab volume 1 of Akira, read through to volume 6 of Akira, and done. And that's something Euro comics have a little bit more of, but that is completely lost in the Anglosphere. And I'm not putting it all on the superhero medium, because it's a problem in Britain too with 2000 AD. Where why is Judge Dredd still running? It makes no sense. That shit.
It's cool.
I mean, he is cool, but so is
right.
Edward Elric's cool too. But we don't need more Full Metal Alchemist. You know what I mean?
But I mean, what if like tomorrow, I can't remember the name's creator of the name of Full Metal. What if tomorrow he decides to bring one out, and you'll be like, yeah, let's go.
Well, I might, or so long it's her. If it's not her, I don't care.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? And that's what it's all about. So as long as say Robbie Williams, right, who's writing a really cool story right now that I'm actually reading, because I haven't read 2080 for years, and actually might be decades. And I'm reading just a short story called serial called Poison, right? Judge Hershey's dead. Judge Dredd goes and finds out. I'm like really involved in it because I remember Judge Hershey. I remember Judge Dredd. I love Judge Dredd, right? Like I say, I love Judge Dredd. And so I'm gonna try to go back to that character when I can, and that's the same thing with a lot of people with Batman. Like they might hate what's happening now, but we actually have 80 years of Batman we can go back to and say, and that's still there for us to go back to. Even the trash that's coming out now, we can excuse that and go, hey, all this good stuff there. And the same thing, a lot of people will still be, because it's Full Metal Alchemist out there, and so is Brotherhood. You can actually go and watch that, and you can actually go read that, and it's there. It's real. It's there in print, right? And so if we got that in print now, and if then she comes out and produces another one, we'll be running for it because we already are fans. And when it comes to comic books, the creator, I don't care if it's you, or if it's me, or if it's Rico, we want fans of our work. And and it takes a while to build up fans. And I think the only reason Marvel still can put out trash sometimes, right, and people will still buy it, because they have fans out there who will still try to get that,
I think
number
we're fans
200, 300 issue.
We're fans of the characters, not necessarily the stories, not necessarily the writers.
I will qualify a little. I don't have a problem with those things existing. Don't get me wrong, but the problem is they're so dominating in the Anglosphere. Yeah, that
some are so bad. But you're absolutely right. The artist changes to a rubbish one, and you're like, but the story can still be good and carry you through. Yeah, if the story's weak, then
it's not even a question of quality. It's the options for the reader. Yes, Image releases cool stuff that you can pick up. IDW, other publishers do that. That's such a small slice. And if you look at the graphic novel format, which is doing very well in schools and other areas as well, which don't go through the traditional publishers, that's a really interesting other story. But if we're talking about the traditional
collective, right?
Yeah.
Amulet. Last week I was talking to Stu, who's worked with libraries, who's a 30-year comic store owner. Sorry
to talk over you before we go.
Yeah, so this over here in Auckland for 30 years, he's been working with libraries and stuff, and we got a librarian coming on to talk about that next week. I couldn't find it last week because like, his wife Sue mentioned this book, and I said, I know I've got it there. And last night I found it. This is one of the biggest books out there right now. Kids love this shit, right?
Yeah.
And it's done through graphics, right? Libraries, they love it. And I don't know why. I haven't read it, but this is up to book 8, right? And so Amulet, like I looked at it, looked really gorgeous, but it's not my thing. I don't like the art style myself, to be honest. It's what they call Tumblr art, and I'm not into that sort of style. I love, a bit more detailed, a bit more emotional, and line work and stuff. But kids love it, and at the end of the day, our kids our age, when we were kids, we were into asterisks and obliques, right? But kids now are into this, and into Dragon Ball Z and manga. And the thing is that kids are getting into stuff that isn't mainstream DC and Marvel anymore. And because of all the things that you're just talking about, the stories, the too many characters, 5 books of friggin' Spider-Man appearing in, which one's right? And I've felt the same way. It's like, which one is the one I'm supposed to, which is Peter?
It's all the switching and bait and switch, and they're building up to something and then completely letting down everyone all the time. Recently.
They reset the story when a new writer comes
in.
Recently, they kind of they don't care about the fan as much, and they intentionally they don't mind. Previously, they cared about what we thought or what we'd want to see at the end or what would be cool. They don't care anymore.
Yeah,
but every now and again they do.
We move on as well, right? If they don't care about us, why should we care about them? That's why a lot of us move over to manga.
Yeah,
right? I think 10 years back in comics.
It's a fair thing though that audiences grow out of what they read, and that's just a natural thing that happens to anyone, and then they'll move on to something else. Part of the problem going on with Anglo comics is there's no new audience coming in. They're really struggling to find new readers to replace them, and I don't think they realize. Maybe they do, but they're caught in a very. It's like it's a systemic problem that the publishers can't fix themselves, or at least when I say publishers, obviously I'm talking about like Marvel and DC, and maybe a few of the others. They can't crack into that young readership, because that young readership wants something they're not providing. In a weird way, I think what has really damaged comics the most is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because it gave such an accurate experience of what reading the books is like in a much more popular and easy to experience form that they satiate. They don't need that in comics anymore. And games too.
Well, the way we consume things changed a lot.
That's what anime does to manga. It lets me enjoy anime without reading the manga.
Yeah, but the good thing about the anime is for the relationship with manga is it's in a lot of ways it's an ad for the manga.
It is an ad. That's the perfect.
If I hadn't watched, and it's good when the anime doesn't cover all of the manga. Like I was 15 and I watched the 90s Berserk anime, and I didn't know it was a manga. So when I found out it was a manga, I got all of it because I wanted to know what happened next. Because I was so I don't know if you guys have seen Berserk. I think you might have. But
that's good.
The ending was such a brutal punch in the dick. Yeah. You're like, this can't be how it ends. It absolutely can't be how it ends, and it wasn't. So you go and you find it, and you buy the manga, and you get like more. You get more of the story. You get all of that. Or you say, for like something like Naruto or My Hero Academia, whatever shonen thing you want to talk about, oftentimes the anime catches up to the manga. So if you want to stay up to date with the characters, you have to read the manga. That's telling you a story that'll get you it sooner and get you into it, because otherwise, you've got all the filler going on. It can actually, contrary to what you were just saying, like reading the manga can often be a quicker experience because of like hours and hours of filler. So it's like it's a great advert though for the comic, and the only Western comics that have a similar thing are The Walking Dead, because of the TV show, and Invincible because of the TV show. They don't have that cross media promotion, and by comics I mean like obviously the non-Marvel DC superhero comics, where you can see this and go, where did this come from? I want to find out.
Right.
It's like a book's biggest sales, if it's an older book, is when they do a TV or film adaptation. Because people will always have an interest in source material. But if the source material isn't coherent, like with superhero stuff, people just get confused and be put off. Like, if you want to read a Game of Thrones in its original form, you go and you buy a Game of Thrones. It's done.
Yeah.
You know where to start. You know where you're going. Watchmen is still... It's insane. It's been out for like 40 years. Watchmen is still one of the best-selling graphic novels of all time and will continue to be, because it's a one-and-done story. If you want to know... Well, I mean, excepting things we won't mention here because they're awful. But it's, you know, it's just the one thing. You can go and you can read it. You don't need to know what arc of Batman and Robin this is and which Robin it is and whoever it is.
Or what have they done to that Robin, right?
Yeah, or whatever. And it's, and because this is a comics podcast where I'm trying to reference something, that loops back into why we structured. It took a while, but I got back to it. It loops into why we made the Startide Shores what it is, because we want it to be full experience you get when you read it. We don't want it to be, oh, there's a crossover here, there's a thing here. If you don't read this, you won't get it. It is intended to be a full experience for the reader. It is intended to be all you need in one place.
And I appreciate that. And I really do. I think, and like, I mean, like, I might come across as, no, I don't do that. No, I actually do, because because when I look at as a creator, right, I'm working on 5 different books right now, and some of them like 6 issues, some of them 4 issues. Some of them is like just one whole complete like a 90-page manga. It's going to be one and done, right? Because that's, you know, because I'm looking at like trying to figure out what market's going to work and what people really want, because you don't know what people want until you try it. And but at least we got this for that person, or we got that for that person, and you know, and so you got different genres and stuff. And one thing I really want to pick your brains at and like really dig at you, and I hope you don't mind, because we're coming up to 2 hour. That's when we close.
Yeah.
And then after the 2 hour mark, it's free for all. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of pop culture stuff. We're going to talk about manga, like studio and stuff. There's something like there was a murder happened a couple of years ago that they finally are going to put justice on that person. So that happens at 2 hour mark, which is about 15 minutes away. But who designed your logo?
Livio.
And
Livio did all the art. I did some of the designs, which he then reinterpreted. Like, I originally designed Elise, you can see there. And then you know, not a crude thing, stick figure design too. Like, I do draw for fun. I'm not great, but good enough that I can convey an idea. And I did a couple of the alien designs, but he did everything. He did the lettering, he did the coloring, because that's how he operates as an independent creator. He's all in one. He's a writer, illustrator. He's very funny, very talented guy. If you guys don't know, he's Illumina Comics on Twitter. He's got his own hilarious range of comics he does. He's great.
You mentioned that you put this out on Twitter. You had a couple of pages there that like you know, kind of like a standalone introduction, promotion stuff. Where is it so I can show that? Like, is there any on that? Because all we see here is artwork and no text. So we don't.
Yeah,
you know,
which maybe wasn't a smart idea. If you go on
chat sleep for me.
Oh yeah, I'll check.
I mean, like, sorry, in the private channel, I'll just look it up.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's. That's one of the things. It's like there's no sort of pages with text and to tell you the story or anything. All we see is like what it's about. It's more like a novel. You know, this is this, this is this, and you know, because we talk about like he's doing his own lettering. So what is this? You know, what does that look like?
So this is where it starts. If you want.
Done cut, and let's bring it up. Let's go. Excellent. So the Startide Shores, here we go. Now we get some actual pages to look at.
There's a real image feel to it.
Yeah,
sorry.
Take us through this.
And that looks at the same standards, like some of the image stuff that, like the style and the coloring. Right. I think it's Fire Fist. I like that comic Fire Fist a lot from Image.
Yeah.
And that reminds me a little bit the colors, I think.
Yeah, Livio's a very talented guy. All credit to him. We had this idea when we were talking about a Kickstarter campaign of doing a promotional comic to post online to coincide with it. He, if you guys remember, I think it was called King's Comics. It was a
Phantom.
No, I'm using the wrong term.
There was another one that came out. It was like about 10 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that, where it's single page stories that all bridge together and create a single narrative. And that was this idea of each page, you get a little, like, essentially a little plot happens on the page and leads into the next thing. Not a whole unique narrative, but like a full scene and scenario to work through. And he wanted to do something like that. I said, okay, well, what if the plot was this, where the plot is essentially Elise is being chased by bounty hunters, as she often is, crash lands on a planet, ends up being impressed to work in this mine, which is what is happening here. She's meeting the guy who's running the mine on behalf of this company called the Uncharted Planets Monopoly, which is kind of our own version of the British East India Company. Right. Very unscrupulous, very brutal, very profit-motivated people. Yeah. And then she breaks out, and she doesn't mind stacking bodies to do that because she's a pretty ruthless person. She's not a bad person, and she's not a nice person either. She'll kill a motherfucker if she has to.
It feels like it's like Barbarella, kind of like crossover into Barbarella. Yeah. Country.
Well, I think of it more like it's a slightly darker take on Flash Gordon, where she's not out to kill Ming the Merciless or whoever, but she lives in a universe that's very much ruled by bad people, and she's just trying to get by. It's like Star Wars without the Rebel Alliance. It's just the dickheads. Yeah, Farscape's a good example too. Yeah. The bad people rule the universe, and there's not much you can do about it other than try and get by. And she just tries to get by while maintaining her autonomy and her freedom, and trying not to be too much of a bastard herself, but obviously having to do some pretty bastard things.
The panel work reminds me of is it J.H. Williams?
I don't know if that was a conscious influence. Livio's pretty creative with his panels.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I like it. Rico, is it J.H. Williams, or is it the third or something like that?
J.H. Williams.
I'm not sure.
The one who did like Batwoman and Rebirth or something.
He did Sandman Overture as well.
Yeah, that's the one. Overture. I love that series. I like his art, man. Yeah, J.H. Williams the third or something like that. And he also worked with Alan Moore on Promethea. I've got them over here somewhere in the hardcover. Yeah, I love that style. I like people, when they do take chances with how the panel works into each other, and it's beautiful. I like the artwork in this, man. It's really well done.
Yeah, he's great. Really, well, the interesting thing about this too is I only plotted it first, and then he went and he drew it all himself, figured out each page himself. We talked it over a little bit, but it wasn't off a script. It was just off like a plot conversation we had. And then I went in and I did the dialogue afterwards because we wanted to try that out. That's not how he did the main book. The main book was based off a script. But for this, we just wanted to, because we're very good friends and he's a very good writer himself. We wanted to try a different way, just to experiment with it and see how it
Holy
worked.
Hell.
The interesting thing.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's like an Alan Moore. It's like an Alan Moore freaking.
If you look at it, he's done a really clever way of leading the eye. Like if you look at those three top panels, each one has a trail leading down into the conversation. And the idea here is each conversation is happening simultaneously in time. Like they're all having these conversations at the exact same time. So that's what we're trying to reflect there. And I thought he did a really cool idea. And it's kind of something you can only really do in comics and still have it be legible. Like you can't make a film where you have 3 scenes running with dialogue at the same time and have people able to really pass it. You need to break it up somehow so it's not a simultaneous experience and still be, easily.
Yeah, and the color works because you got the green one lane, you got the orange, kind of like, apricot, and then you got the yellow, and it's still like separating it all. It's really nice. I love it. I do love like you said, it wasn't the same in the other one. This style of panel work, or is it different in the other one?
There's some really interesting panel work in the other one, but we don't want to show everyone everything all at once.
Sure.
Which might be a mistake. We could have lost out on like $2,000 by holding back some stuff. But he's always been very creative with his panel choices, which I push him to do. There's one page early on in the comic where I said, "Hey, try this. I think it would be really cool." And he's like, "I don't know if I'm good enough, man. I'm trying. This is my idea. I didn't want to do this thing in the script because I wasn't sure I could do it." And I was like, "No, man. You can do it. Just give it a crack." And he did, and I think it's one of the strongest pages on the book. And it gave him more confidence to do that in his work. Where it's like, yeah, no, I can do that.
I realized I was going to buy it, and then I realized everybody's going to know my freaking credit details, and I was like, no, I'll wait.
Yeah, you can wait.
Yeah, I'm not going to freaking, I'm not going to fucking do it on like live stream so everybody can see my credit details. Like, wait, hey, Rita, can you take over for a bit? Ask some questions, and I'll be back in a sec.
Yeah, no
That's
worries.
okay.
Sure. Well, I mean, it looks pretty damn cool, and you said you're going to keep on the low with some of it. By the sounds of it, if the Empire is like, I'm using the word Empire, like British Empire.
There's multiple great powers in the setting. There's the Astral Empire, which is more influenced by the British Empire, ruled by this species called Astrals, who are literal energy beings who have assumed the physical form. They're born from supernovas. One of the characters in the preview, I don't know. We never know what it's called. Is it a pilot? Is it a prequel?
Was it the guy with the collar?
Yeah, he's actually living starlight. That's been.
Oh, I wondered. He had an interesting design. Yeah. Like, so it's kind of like a fake body.
Essentially, yeah. They're these energy beings who have taken on a more physical form because they want to experience biological
like their
experience.
Clothes. Because I noticed a bit on his, he had like kind of a
it's kind of a skin suit. Really.
Yeah, it's kind of like the old school androids, like the life model decoys. Like he's like, but they look very regal as well. So yeah.
But we also said early on, we don't want the human faction and the Klingon faction thing. Every empire has a mix of species in them. Where
do humans factor in? Are they the low caste?
They're not the low caste, but they're more spread around everywhere. We actually had a backstory for them. Humans don't have a homeworld. They're kind of found a little bit of everywhere. This is where Livia and I have a slight different idea about what that means in the setting. If we write more, we'll get to it. It means that they don't have a home. Humans don't really have a home setting. They're found everywhere, and of course they have their own places they live, but they can't point to any one planet and say this is where we're from. Why that is a mystery.
Oh.
But they're not from Earth secretly. This is a wholly separate universe. There's no Earth in this. It's not the far future or anything like that. But they
so
find a lot of
all races kind of intermold, interact a little bit, or other than the big kind of energy people and things, they're probably a bit more segregated. The higher level,
not as much as you'd think, because it depends. And this is more a world building note. We did think about the world with those energy beings when they want a biological existence. They want to interact with people. Some are, of course, hoity-toity assholes, but others they want to get in amongst people. They're like I guess for lack of a better term, they're like first world people who go to Bali and they want to get in amongst the
kind of like people. Celebrities. They're getting out and about and partying.
More like rich white yuppies, if yuppies still exist, where they, it's not I don't want to get too into it because, again, I don't believe in fronting the themes too much.
Mm-hmm.
But there's definitely commentaries on things like colonialism and capitalism and stuff like that in the work. But first and foremost, we're trying to have a fun adventure. The
your main protagonist, I imagine, like, because it's such a, like, what's the word, like authoritarian, like rough world. I can only imagine, even though she's like young adult, 20s, 30s.
2030s, very, yeah. I don't know if we've
That,
set a definite age on her, but late 20s, I think is.
but she's lived a bit in this world and been a bit of a, what's it, like Han Solo type character, a little bit.
Like a bit.
Yeah, but I suppose, like, dealing with all the bad in the world, like, does she have like a softening that's part of the storyline? Like, does she kind of find more heart? Or
she has her own sense of morality. She's not a completely amoral protagonist. She's not Han Solo. Like I said, she's a bit more of a. She's fundamentally meant to be a heroic character. Maybe a bit more in that old sense of heroic in the things she does than in the ideals she occupies. Kind of like, no
in the
one's
actions.
Yeah, but she definitely has her own sense of morality. She has lines she won't cross, but she's not intended to have some big arc.
That's not part of her story. Like,
no, it's not part of her story.
Being like some bright light.
Her ambition and her character drive is to be an independent person. She does not want to answer to a king or a prime minister or anything like that. Not in the anarcho-libertarian sense, just in the sense of she's a natural wanderer. She just wants to maintain her ability to come and go.
This is a girl making her way in the galaxy.
Yeah, more or less. And if
Feels like she's got some good skills there.
yeah,
Again,
like if she needs to, she will cut a throat or two. She doesn't set out to do that, but if she needs to, because like there's not a lot of avenues for legitimate business unless you want to work for some very unpleasant people. But yeah, she's a bit of a pirate. She's a bit of a mercenary. She does this or that. I wouldn't describe her character arc as being a softening, but she very much is someone who she's no one's tool, I guess is what I'm getting at. She does not like being used by the powers around her.
kind of carving her own path.
Yeah, essentially. She will
What's
work
the
to eat, but
what's the support characters like? Because you mentioned some of the aliens, and there's that picture of that little smaller, short alien.
The plot presumably... because it's only 60 pages. This is why there's not a lot of story told, because it's only 60 pages. 60 pages only so much plot. But essentially, the incident that starts the story is she's hired by a servant of the royal family of this empire, the Jujani Empire, to rescue a prince, because the old emperor is dying and it kind of runs on Ottoman rules. When the new emperor takes over, he murders all his brothers. That's how the Ottoman Empire used to work. And it was to prevent civil war. And it was pretty effective. The Ottoman Empire had very few civil wars compared to any other empire ever in existence because of this policy. So the old emperor is dying, and the servant of this boy, this young prince, doesn't want to see him get executed. So he hires Elise to abduct him and take him to safety, while his older brother, who's nominally the villain of the story, is beginning his purge. So she takes the contract thinking, all right, in and out, drop off, done. And then finds out very quickly it's a bit more complicated than what she expected out the gate.
That's a good elevator pitch. He really piques the interest. Like that.
I should have leaned into it more. I should have leaned into it a little bit more. And I have learned what I've done wrong with this Kickstarter campaign. But overall, I think it's been a success. I mean, we hit our target. We've done a little bit better than our target, so I can't complain too much.
Aaron, you got in there?
Yeah, I went and did it behind while you were talking away.
No worries. Yeah, she's a tough woman. She knows how to handle herself. It's like I said, the idea is more of like a Conan the Barbarian or Flash Gordon style pulp era. And when you read those, you're not getting big character arcs where they go through great sweeping character development, even like a Judge Dredd, for instance. It's not necessarily about any big overt character arc. That it is there, but it's played a bit more subtly than what you get in other things, where they start going, I don't give a damn about your rebellion to freedom for all. It's not, for one, it's not that kind of story, because this universe is one where, you can't really beat the system that way, if you could beat the system at all. It's more about carving out your individual freedoms, but also it's just not what
that's basically what, like, you can't change the world without changing your community, right? And so you got to work in your little sphere of that, and then work, and hopefully that expands with somebody else taking it further. And
well, the first place you got to start is you got to change yourself before you can change your community.
And then outward, like, is your like the 12 rules for living, whatever it was, like, change your, clean up your room, man. You want to go clean up the environment? Why don't you pick up the rubbish from your house?
I really want to help people. It's like, you can't help yourself.
Does your mom need the dishes done? Have you done the dishes for your mom today? All right. Have you put them away? Have you done the washing? No. Well, how dare you come and tell you want to change the world? Why don't you change your own place?
There's this thing that gets posted, or used to get posted online a lot. That kind of annoys me. I get the sentiment, and I kind of agree with it a little bit, but it's that whole, if you're feeling overwhelmed, look for the helpers. Fred Rogers quote. You guys may have all seen it on Facebook. I get it, but the thing is, that is a quote intended to console distressed children. Where when you're an adult, no, you're the helper. You have to go. If you want to see good change, you have to do it. You have to be the one who steps up. You have to volunteer time. You have to sign the petition, if not, like, take the petition around or whatever. Like, that's part of being an adult person, in my opinion. You have a responsibility as a member of your community and as an adult person to engage and do those things.
Is really something that we've lost, isn't it? Like, we've sort of lost that personal responsibility, and I think that's what I love about the story. And you got, like Rico said, I backed it. You got my 15 or 17 New Zealand dollars, I should say. Your exchange rate cost me extra $2. That's not cool.
Don't worry, I cop that all the time too. Or get screwed over by the Americans and the Brits.
Man. We deal with a lot of overseas stuff, so I'm used to that. So, guys, as we finish off here, we're hitting the 2-hour mark. The link for the Kickstarter is in the chat. We're going to do what we do always is like 3 to 5 minutes. I'll give you time to think about this, Henry. It's like words of wisdom. Like, it's basically, as a creative, what have you learned and what do you want to impart as we finish this segment? And then after that, we're going to look at a whole bunch of different other stuff, news items, maybe some trailer. There's a Henry Cavill trailer.
I have to go make dinner soon, so I probably can't stick around for that. But
that's fine. Me and Rico will hang out. Hopefully he doesn't have to run away tonight. It's Friday. I'm sure Tanya's going to be okay. But
when he asked, like, I've got no life. It's Friday.
Well, you're in the Waffle, so it's okay.
It's my wife's birthday tomorrow, so I'm going to make her a nice dinner.
Yeah, you got to make sure. Yeah, so I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about it. But thank you guys for watching. If you haven't subscribed already, please do subscribe. And do check out the Kickstarter. I think I like it. Like I said, I thought I had like the Promethea. I think I've got the single issues of Promethea, which is part of this top 10 set, which I have hardcovers of. But I think I have the individual covers and individual issues, I should say, of Promethea, which is what the artwork reminds me of. The beautiful panel work. As someone who is a fan for over 35 years of comics and who collects comics and creates comics, I just found that really interesting in the way the artwork's set up and the panels works and everything, the color to tone. Like, I've had to deal with that this week, like just changing the skin color of a person to make sure it works, with the character, with my artist. So do check it out. I really appreciate it if you guys will, because like I said, I'm backing it, so why can't you? But
when does
like
the Kickstarter finish?
It's up to you. It's up to you to decide if this is the book for you. Go check it out. The link's there. And also, I should actually put this the link to the Twitter there while we're waiting. Giving some chance for Henry to get his words together as I finish up here. And so the link for the Twitter to check out those intro pages or standalone pages to see get a bit of information about what's coming out. But remember, it's 60 pages. It's basically a trade paperback, right? Kind of, trade paperback, full story, which is cool. And if you do, if it does really well, I'm sure he's going to go write another story, because there's never one story in us, especially when you're doing comics, because then you go, what if I do this? What if she decides to do that? What if that person decides to do that? And, and then the story formulates. So I understand that. But are you ready, Henry?
Yeah, sure. Words of wisdom. Right. If you are thinking about creating a story, I don't care what medium it is, comics, prose, whatever, know what you're about. Know what you like and what you want to say, because there are so many people out there who just want to be a creator and don't really have anything they're trying to say. And if you have nothing to say, no one's going to really listen. So know what you're about, and on that, figure out how to say it. And in my opinion, the best way to figure that out is to read it, or consume. I don't like the word consume, but experience as much as you can in fiction, in non-fiction, in lived experience. Find the words in other people's work that you can relate into your own without plagiarizing, obviously. And do that by being broad. It's fine for a fan to have narrow taste. If as a reader, all you like to read is fantasy, fine, that's fine. I've got no problem with that. But if you are a creator, that's not good enough. You need to read everything. You need to watch everything. You need to draw on everything. If you really want to be able to find out how to say what you want to say, that is the key to it. Otherwise, you're just going to be repeating other people, and that's not much of an experience you're offering anyone if that's what you're doing. I guess that's all I want to say.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. I mean, a lot of time people think that, like, if you want to write sci-fi, just read sci-fi. That's not going to help.
You should, but don't just read that.
Yeah. I mean, you got to experience life, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Henry. I really appreciate you coming on board.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this.
Nice meeting you, Henry.
Yeah, you too.
Good luck with the Kickstarter. 3 days to go.
Yeah, exciting. I can be a bit of a gabber, so I'm sorry if I talked over anyone. If I talked
You're
too
fine,
much,
dude.
I appreciate.
I did wonder one last thing, Henry, just before you go. I just looked over the Kickstarter, and I know you said you're going to be releasing some out of Australia and sending from there yourself.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is there, like, if I got a retailer bundle, not for me, but like to give out to people, like, could you sign any?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
No worries.
I'll put in. I'm just gonna see how my budget goes, but it's always nice to get a few issues, and then it's a good way of getting it out in the community. Bit of fun.
I appreciate that. Yeah. No, absolutely. Just message me separately. If you have a Kickstarter account, you'll be able to do that. Just to remind me in case I forget. I shouldn't do.
Sweet as.
Because we've had the retailer bundle tier was kind of an obligatory tier. I knew we weren't going to get many.
Oh, I think it's nice. That's what, like, if you want to get that footprint, like, it's nice to get it, I can get them into my little community maybe, and I can give some away, to comic fans. And that'd be cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, happy to sign them.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. And yes, again, thanks for having me on.
Cheers, dude. We'll
I am now going
when that game thing happens, let us know.
Yeah, anything. I'll let you guys know. This is a lot of fun. But I gotta go make my wife dinner.
Oh, yeah. That's the wife. Right. Happy birthday to her.
Yeah. Thank you to anyone who listened to me waffle on a bit. And I'll try and catch you next show.
Cheers, mate.
Awesome.
Catch ya.